Hello, hello, and welcome to this Wellness Wednesday presentation just for mamas and any dads who want to listen. I know on the live version we had some dads today, so that's super cool. But we're going to talk about how to successfully have a relaxing and healthy summer. What I found repeatedly over the course of traveling across the country was that there are so many parents who want to do the healthy eating thing. They want to eat well themselves, they want to help their picky eaters. And at first, I was getting really annoyed that no one would just take action and do what they needed to do. But I realized that actually we schedule ourselves out of a lot of the things that we want to do. And so that's really where my attention is focused these days. And today we are specifically going to focus on where some of those things intersect with our summer. Because we all want to have summers that come September. When we get that question, how was your summer? We can genuinely have a huge smile and say, great. All right, so let's dive in. So, always with many of the things that I talk about, whether it's deep about food, around scheduling, around summer, we always need to start with how we want to feel. This is super, super, super important. Um, we we need to understand this at our core to be able to do things that lead us toward how we want to feel. Because with a lot of things like summer being a really big one because it's 2 months long, but a lot of the things that we repeat over and over in our lives, like holidays like Christmas and Hanukkah and Thanksgiving and whatever birthdays, whatever holidays we celebrate in our life, those come very loaded with a lot of learned behaviors. And summer sort of falls into that same thing, except guess what? Summer's a huge chunk of our year. Christmas, that comes and goes in a day. So it's really, really important to start with how we want to feel. And based on how we want to feel, then and only then do we create a series of events that make us feel that way. So I'm only going to be talking for a little under an hour about this today. So this is really an ongoing process that we could go really deep in and really wide on. So I've just picked three things that I think are going to make a really big impact, and I can give you the tools that you might need to start doing those within this time frame. All right. So the one thing I want to note that's a little different about our situation versus maybe other people's situations is that we are in a family. So we're going to need to tune into how we feel, but we're also going to need to tune into how others want to feel. And we may need to come to this at varying levels, but the important part, I think, is that we're just starting to tune into how somebody wants to feel. Because when we're just planning things in a time like the summer, just to keep up with friends or just because we're doing it and we don't even know why we're doing it, all of a sudden our summer's filled with things that we don't even want to do or that might not even serve our kids the best. So that's why we're heading here. So I want to talk about a few things that we can take into account to really sort of feel this way and how we're going to get to a point where you know how you want to feel. So my recommendation is to dream and to write. And here's what you're going to do to get into a state where you can do this. You're going to have to sort of figure out how you can tap into what you want. And all it means to tap in and know what you want is to sit down and write what you want on a piece of paper. For some of us, this is a little harder to do. For others, we wake up and it's like we know exactly how we want to feel and what we want over the course of our summer, our lives, our school year, whatever it is that we're thinking about at this time. For others of us, we're sucked in a little bit into the rat race we need to get out of our heads a little bit to be able to think through how we actually want to feel. So I have a couple recommendations for this, some of actually which are not written here. So the first one is meditation. Sitting quietly, taking deep breaths, just taking time out of your head, focusing on your breath, not getting lost in your thoughts for 5-10 minutes before you sit down to write can do a lot to calm our brains. If you're like, what? I'm not a meditator, then don't do that. But maybe you are a runner, or you like to go on walks, or working out is your thing, or you go to yoga. Any of those things are fine. Whatever your thing is that gets your mind clear, do that and then write. If still you feel like you're really like you can't think outside the box when you sit down to figure out how you want to feel this summer, here's another tool that I use sort of frequently. I use it more usually in the New Year's time, but I've used it at other times as well, and I think it really helps take us into our imagination. So a lot of times I think what happens is we're parents is that we're really stuck in the moment, which is a really good thing for so many aspects of our life. But it's hard when we're trying to make new habits and make changes because we're stuck in behaviors that may not exist ongoing. So, for example, we're overwhelmed by all the meals we have to make and get on the table. We're overwhelmed by a picky eater. We're overwhelmed by a child who won't eat anything but cookies. We're overwhelmed by these little things that may just be a function of our child's age. And so, one of the tools I love to talk about is your 20-year story. So, if you're having a hard time imagining how you want to feel, sit down and imagine what summer's like 20 years from now. So, even if you have a newborn, in 20 years, they're not home. You're not needing to feed them. You're not worried about what they're eating. You're worried about your energy. You're worried about being able to be there for your future grandkids or your current grandkids. You're wanting to maybe travel. Maybe you've written a book. Like, what is it like in 20 years when they're not there anymore? How are you going to feel? And that helps you map towards how you create a life now that can get you there. So I love that as a tool if you're really feeling stuck. So, actually, before I dive into this, I just want to say three things. So, when we're thinking about how we want to feel, um, if you come up with like, I really want summer to be quiet and reflective, then when you see this big family reunion on your calendar, that might not feel so good. And if your goal is around feeling super healthy, which might be the reason you show up in my world, 12 barbecues on the calendar may not do the trick. So, this is where how we want to feel really starts to directly impact what it is that we spend, how we spend our time during the summer. So I just want to share on the flip side, if you're craving that reflective time, there's things that you can do in the summer that you couldn't do at other times of the year that can really help get you there. So if you have small kids and there's a neighborhood teenager who's maybe not quite the person you'd leave your kids with for the whole day, but could come over for 2 hours in the afternoon, you could just go close your door. You could walk down by yourself to the park, whatever. You could find that reflective time that you're needing and that your kids are safe in a different way than usually we can find during the school year. You could, if that doesn't feel good, something I've done is I've committed to being with my kids during summery days, but then asked my parents or my mother-in-law to have the kids for a few days at a time so that I had a few days to get creative. So there's all sorts of things you can do in the summer that you just can't do when it's the school year. And same thing with like that wanting to get healthy. The summer offers so much. It offers like fresher food than we get at the rest of the year, and it offers extra time if we claim it. So that's where we're going to jump in right now, is that claiming that time to make some of these changes. So in my time working with moms, really pretty deeply this year as I was on the road, there were three things that seemed to make the biggest difference. The first one was just being able to get off on the right foot. And when I say these things make the biggest difference, they make the biggest difference both ways, whether they go good or they go bad. They seem to impact things in that way. So if one gets off on the right foot in a good way, then the whole rest of the day seems to follow suit. If one doesn't get off the foot in a good way, like start the day in a good way, then very often as women, we hold that and we can't move through it. And the habits that we're trying to cultivate don't follow that bad beginning. Does that make sense? The second thing I saw a lot of and got a lot of questions as I was traveling across was just that whole deer in the headlights around food, that idea that we are overwhelmed around what to eat, how to possibly fit it into our busy lives. And then what ends up happening is we open that fridge at 5:45 to make dinner and it's full of delicious ingredients, but we literally can't put it together because we don't have enough time, we're overwhelmed, our kids aren't eating anything, and we get that deer in headlight mentality. And then the third thing is really just that 100% time overwhelm, where literally a lot of the times we want to change our health, we want to change our habits, we want to help our kids be healthy eaters, but literally there is not enough time in our day. We have not scheduled the time. We have scheduled all the time in our day toward other things, and we have not put in the time that it takes to do that well. So these are the three things that really struck me over and over again this year as I would speak in front of parents, as I would work deeply with a select few, and it was the same thing over and over again. So if any of these things usually resonate with you, please know you're not alone, but we got to really dig into them and find some solutions. And those are the things that I want to share a couple with you now. So let's talk tools. And for each one of these three areas, I want to share with you today one tool that I think can help move the barometer in the right direction so that you're feeling a little less overwhelmed in that area. So the first one is getting off on the right foot. And this could have a number of different tools associated with it depending on what we're talking about. But one of my favorite things to do is really tackle the morning routine. And this is big. And if you've heard me talk about this before, don't press pause now, because this is actually an exercise I go through at least 2, sometimes 4, if I'm really being good, 6 or 7, because I'll do it for the holidays times a year, because our schedules change. And so summer is a really good time to analyze this and figure out how you can use your morning. And the cool thing about summer, if you've never claimed your mornings since motherhood, is that it's a good time because very often we have stretches of vacation. If our kids are in camp, sometimes it's a little bit later. There's just more light hours in the day. So I don't know, the edge is taken off a little bit in the summer. So this is a great time to tackle some of the things we're going to talk about when we talk about the morning routine. And then when you redo this again in September and think about your September schedule, usually because you've done it in the summer, you'll have a whole new set of habits and rituals that'll be really easy to fold into September. And a lot of times in September, we're trying to figure out how to bring this relaxed attitude of summer into the more bustling time of the fall. Even though we might not feel that right now, because it's always a little hard as the season's changing. So here's how we start. We start by making a list of everything that you do in the morning between getting up and getting out the door. And I want you to be detailed. So, do you brush your teeth? Don't say everybody brushes their teeth if it's separate activities. So maybe you wake up and brush your teeth and then you go downstairs and do something and you come back up and you wake up the kids and you ask them to brush their teeth. So all those things would be separate things that you could then list out. The more detailed you are, it's just the easier it's going to be to fit in extra stuff and know what you could take out and shift a little bit. So After you've written this whole list, and it might be that you get to this whole list because you spend 3 mornings actually noting what it is you do, because a lot of the things we do sort of unconsciously. And I think that's one of the things, and one of the reasons I do this exercise with people and do it myself, is that those mornings where we wake up and we're in a really good mood because we've had a good night's sleep, and we wake up the kids and everything seems to be going great, but there's some trigger that happens somewhere along the way that by the time, and it usually has to do with time, by the way, by the time that we're trying to get out the door, somebody's gotten annoyed, we're running late, and by the time you all get in the car, somebody's yelled at somebody. Sometimes it's mama bear, and no one's feeling good about the situation or about themselves, and that's what we're trying to avoid. And that gets avoided by really just thinking through it as a process, which is life changing to one person. But when you're a family, it's pretty much necessary. And because it's so necessary, it can be really life changing to a family. So after you've made your list of these 3 specific things, then I want you, and by the way, because you've gotten this in an email, you've clicked on a link to get to this recording. There's also a PDF that has all this as a worksheet. So don't feel like you have to capture all of this. You have a worksheet. You could pause right now and be doing it as we go, or you can do it after you finish. Pausing might be a good idea now that you can do that. I like that idea. So you could press pause and you could make that list right now. And so when you're back, I want you to then list in the right-hand column 3 specific things that you can do to take better care of yourself in the morning. So what's missing? A lot of times when we end up in that yelly state in the car on the way to wherever we're going, it's because we have taken care of everybody under our roof except ourselves. And that's depleting, and we don't want to start the day depleted. So what are some things that you can do to take better care of yourself? And friends, this does not have to be going out and getting a massage and a pedicure or whatever in the morning. In fact, that is not what I consider self-care. I'm talking about like deep, nurturing self-care, and it doesn't have to be complicated. Is it that you need to remember to take your supplements? Is it that you want to have a meditation practice? Is it that you want to read a little bit every morning? Is it that you need to remember to get hydrated and drink a glass of water? Is it that you just want 10 minutes to sit at the table and have a cup of warm tea? Maybe that's more of a fall one, but we're having some cool days here in the summer. Do you want to exercise? And can you wake up a little earlier and do that? Take a walk, take a run, go to the gym, whatever it is that is your exercise. Maybe you just get a 15-minute thing online and you do those stretches. What can you do in the morning to take better care of yourself? I want you to write 3 things. Then I want you to write 3 things that your kids can do each morning to make the day run smoother. Now, these 3 things are things from that first list. You're not making up anything new here. With the self-care, you were kind of making up something new. With these 3 things, you are looking at that list of all the things that need to get done in the morning, and you are writing down 3 ways that your kids can help with those to make it run smoother. So could they unload the dishwasher? Could they make their own breakfast? Could they just get themselves dressed? Could they start brushing their teeth without getting reminded? And you're going to write down these 3 things. Now, these 3 things aren't going to change in 24 hours, but because it's the summer, you have time and space where you can actually teach them to get these things done. So now do you see how impactful this could be even in just a week from now, but definitely by the time school starts? Yeah, that's why we're doing it. So then I want you to rewrite 3 items from your morning routine that you can reframe so that you can add joy and connection to your morning. So this is again going back to that initial list that you have in your left-hand column, and I want you to find 3 things that you dread. And for a lot of us, there's more than 3 things during this time that we dread if we're making breakfast and packing lunches and trying to remember stuff. You know, all these things are things that we can easily come to dread. So what are 3 of those things, and how can you reframe them? Now let me give you an example so you know what I mean. So if packing lunches is that thing that just puts you over the edge, then reframe it and say, I am packing lunches so that my child can bring their lunch to school and think clearer and have even energy throughout the day. Or I am packing myself a lunch so that I can hit my fitness goal and have the energy that I want to show up and be the best mom. See what I mean? So it's easy to reframe them because remember, we're mapping all of this back to that way we want to feel. So that's why that step was really important. So if you know what that is, then it's very easy to reframe the things that you dread because all the things in your morning routine should lead you toward feeling that. Now, that said, what I haven't said here is if there's anything in the morning that just doesn't need to get done, that's possible, then just scratch that off your list. Then you don't need to do it. But for the most part, when we write down all those things in the morning, they're actually things that need to happen. Whether we like them or not, they have to happen. Like teeth brushing. They just has to happen. All right, let's talk about that deer in headlights around food thing. So this is about coming up with what you know and what you want to learn around food. So this again is an exercise of planning, of getting things out of your head and onto paper, because one of the things that we do as multitasking women, which in the end studies have shown is not our best quality, or it's not a quality that leads to a calm life that's not overwhelmed and stressed out. Like, we're not as human beings meant to multitask, even though clearly we can do it as moms. So a lot of this is just about getting things from your head to paper so that you're not holding on to them, you're not having to remember them, because even when you open that fridge before dinner and it's full with food that you could make for dinner, you're not going to remember what you know if you're stressed out. It's just, we don't do that. So what I want you to do is I want you to make a list of the dishes that you know how to make and feel are healthy. And just write them down. You know how to make things, even if it's as simple as an almond butter and jelly sandwich. Write them down. What do you know how to make? And just write them on a list so that when you're in that moment, you know what it is that you could make when you're in that moment of deer in headlights with the fridge open. Or when you're making your meal plan for the week. There's lots of different stress triggers that we end up having, but having this list is helpful and it will come in handy for other things that I teach you. So then I want you to make a list of 5 foods, dishes, whatever, that you would love to know how to make. So we all have limits. We all have things we don't know how to do. I don't know how to make bread. I don't know how to make gluten-free bread. That's something that I've never done well. I enjoy it when other people do it, but I don't know how to do that. So that's on my list. I want to learn how to do that. That might end up in my fall list because it's not really a summer thing. But what is it that you want to learn how to make? And maybe it's that you have a recipe. Maybe it's that you've seen a class being taught. What are those things that you just don't know how to do, but you want to make? And maybe you have a friend who could teach you, or maybe it's something that your mom used to make that you just don't know how to make. Get them down on paper, even if you were not sure how you would ever learn how to make that thing. And then third, make a list of 3 things that you want to teach your kids. So empowering our kids to be able to cook is important. And so how can you use the time in the summer to teach them something? And it might be teaching them about eating a new food. It might be putting a plan into place to move a picky eater forward around salad or some particular food, or it might be about actually learning how to cook something. Either one is fair game. But there's something about writing this down that has magic. So a lot of you guys know my story way back when I figured out food, and I did not know how to cook. I did not know anything about food or cooking or anything before I went on this health journey 8 years ago. And so my first step was to take out all these foods that weren't serving me. And the way I made that manageable for myself was I figured out how to make 5 things that somebody taught me how to make. They were fine. It wasn't somebody who was a cook necessarily who taught them to me. But I did that for 5 or 6 months and it changed my health. But it got boring. And I wasn't dealing with my kids. And I remember there was a moment when I was like, okay, if I feel this good on this food, first of all, I have to learn for it not to be this boring. And at this point, I had tapped into some restaurants that ate the way that I wanted to eat. So I knew there was more possibility. And I want to figure out how for my kids to come along for the ride. And interestingly enough, 2 days later, I thought to do a Google search for a cooking class. I found one that was happening the next day, just a mile away from me. And it was at the house of Nina Manelson, who you guys have heard me talk about. She's been interviewed on the podcast. I share her recipes from time to time. So I never would have found that if I didn't write that down and make that commitment. All right. So with those two things, we have some morning routines and we have some food, some new foods that we want to fit into our life, some things we might want to teach our kids. All of these things are great. To me, all these things are planning, and planning is like getting those things out of your head and onto paper and putting some sort of structure around them so you actually can do them. And usually planning, again, is always mapped toward that bigger goal. And so that's the notion of a plan. But this is what I really learned this year as I got really close to a lot of moms on my travels and a lot of people in the Plan Simple Meals community is I realized that planning isn't enough because we can plan, but that doesn't mean that it actually fits into our life or gets on our calendar. Like that was the missing link for a lot of people. And there was a lot of people actually who would get things a lot into their calendar and just maybe forget the food, but not have the plan. So we tend to fall into one of the two categories naturally. And so the idea is if you're somebody who's always calendaring and planning and getting everything in a calendar, then maybe you need to go back to sort of the more big picture stuff. If you're still feeling overwhelmed and if you're always making lists and thinking big picture, then you actually need to get those things into your calendar. So pick 3 things that you did and get them in that you've done so far, that you've made in a list, that you've put in a plan. Just pick 3 of them. I know that you've come up with a lot of things that you want to change in your life, but pick 3 and get them in your calendar. So if when you were thinking about the morning routine, green smoothies came up, or water, or supplements came up, put those in your calendar. Like set a reminder on your phone so that a little alarm goes off at that time, but like block it out. Like don't just set your alarm on your phone because that's not actually tied to your calendar. So a lot of times, like when I first did this, actually this exercise for water, I set the little alarm on my phone to go off every hour to remember to drink some water, but that wasn't actually attached to my calendar. So what would happen is sometimes I would be in the middle of a client call, or I would be doing something like recording a podcast and my little alarm would go off and I couldn't actually realistically drink the water because I hadn't put that thing in my calendar. So it didn't actually fit into my life. So putting 3 dates in your calendar will actually make 3 of the things that you came up with that you want to do fit into your life. And over time, we'll figure out how to put more. But for right now, just commit to 3 after you've done that initial work. Does that sound good? All right. So really quickly, based on that food list that we were talking about, I just wanted to give you 3 quick, this is like a sidebar to this presentation, 3 quick food things that I think are the summer brings opportunity to fit in. So one is green smoothies. If you were at a loss of what is a good self-care practice, try them. They're amazing. The other one is cashew cream. And by the way, all of these are in your PDF, these recipes. But cashew cream is a great way to, if yogurt is something that's always in your diet, or whipped cream makes you feel sad when you don't have it, or you're just in general are bummed out if dairy is something you want to try not having, cashew cream will change all of that. It's like whipped cream, yogurt, all of that in one. It's awesome, versatile. It can actually be sweet or savory. Um, and the recipe for that is in the printout, and I recommend looking at it. And then rice bowls. So rice bowls are another way to switch habits. If you're looking for something to learn and add into your rituals this summer, rice bowls are something I highly recommend. It's a way to sort of reconfigure your plate, focus on veggies, focus on a rainbow, and give those in your family who aren't quite ready to be healthy a model that allows them to do it over time. You can definitely, they could just start with rice and beans and some cucumber, whereas maybe you also have the avocado and the corn and everything else. Does that make sense? Okay, so I don't want to do this, was a side note for sure, but I just couldn't resist. Okay, so the third thing is time overwhelm. And this is big, and this is where I'm going to focus a lot of my time over the next foreseeable future, because this is the thing again that really stuck out to me this year, is that the reason the food is feeling so overwhelming to so many people is we literally have not created the time to fit it into our lives. And so a lot of that has to do with being busy with things we don't want to be busy with. And a lot of it just has to do with we can still do all the things we want to do, but we simply have to figure out how to get the food in there too. And what happens is with the time overwhelm is a lot of us are staying busy, because if you're asked, how are you? And you say, I'm busy, that's almost like a good thing in our society. And when we have that overarching belief, then we end up doing things that don't matter, and we end up in this lack of balance. So I'm asked a lot about the work-life balance, and I'm not sure that I believe in it in the way that maybe we're taught to believe in it, but I do believe that there's balance. And I believe as we start to balance our lives more on paper, like how we're doing here, we'll start to feel it more, even if, we the reality hasn't tipped. It's that we're actually thinking through that plan on paper in a more balanced way. And balance doesn't have to be on a daily, hourly, minute basis. Balance can be over the course of a week. And that's where that original concept of like working during the week and taking the weekends off, shops used to be closed on the weekends, all that kind of stuff, but we've shifted. And so now we actually have to plan to create that balance that used to actually be there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through 3 different ways to plan your summertime. And I'm going to actually show you the worksheets. I just want to talk through them. I want to glance through them with you in this presentation, but then you're going to go off and do them. I just want to make sure all the different entries are super clear and why there's 3 of them. So there's 3 of them. There's a personal plan, what I call the mama plan. It could be the papa plan, but the mom plan. There's the family plan, because remember, as individuals, as moms, we're still part of our family. And then the individual plans, which would be maybe your kids or your spouse, because we can't just do self-care without expecting that others will take care of themselves too. And other people have different needs. And it's a great way, once we start taking in on account all the needs of everyone in our family, it's a great way to really figure out that overarching, how do we want to feel this summer mode. So before we dive into that, I just want to say that I am really obsessed right now with this idea that the more we get down on paper, the more we try to balance, the more we're moving toward the meaning that we want in our life, the better we can do. And I totally, fully, with all my body and heart and soul, believe that food has this amazing power that when we eat clean, all this stuff shifts. Like, I don't believe that all the kids in school have ADD right now. I believe that they're all eating too much sugar and processed food, and that is causing behavior. Of course, there's people who have real ADD, but a lot of time those things are food related. Personally myself, I had a different food experience where food actually made me tired what I was eating because I was eating the wrong food. So there's all sorts of different ways it can manifest. And once we take control of our health, of our food, of our water intake, of our exercise, of our sleep, we can change so many important aspects of our life. But if we don't plan for that, if we don't fit it into our life as it exists, it doesn't usually happen. And then what I found is that then years and months and then years go by, and I'm like, what happened? Like, where did all that time go? And I feel like a micro view of that is summer. And that's why I'm here right now doing this, talking about this. I'm also on Facebook Live every day at 12:30, at least for the next month, talking about these topics. But it is so, so important, I believe, that we make time for all these things that really matter, because we have made time for all these things that may or may not matter. And so figuring those out, we all have the same amount of time in a day. And if you look up to people, look at what they do in their day and see how it's different from what you do in your day. All right. So I'm doing something a little different this summer, and this actually came out of doing this work. So, what I found is I have something super so exciting that I can't even believe it, happening in September, which you will hear about very shortly. Oh my gosh, it's so exciting. It's like a dream come true. And I was going to launch a big group program this summer. And one thing is, I knew that maybe not everybody wanted to show up for a big group program in the summer. But two, it wasn't the right thing for me. It took me out of who I wanted to be for my family and how healthy I wanted to become over this summer. And so I'm doing something a little different, which is I am taking on 6 individual clients, which means that 6 people in this community are going to get some really lots of attention from me and are really going to be able to shift their time and shift their schedule. And we're going to look at food, we're going to look at work. This is particularly an awesome coaching program for mompreneurs, homeschoolers. We're really going to tackle these issues of self care and food and work and balance and how all that relates to planning in the calendar. So if that sounds interesting to you, the summer is always my personal favorite time for my own growth. So I do something, I always hire um, coaches and teachers in the summer because I think it's just a great time to grow. So now I want to in turn give back and do that for my community. So I'm hoping to fill the 6 spots in the next week or so. So if you're interested, make sure that you email mia@plansimplemeals.com, and either I or someone on my team will get right back to you. And no matter who gets back to you, I will then jump on the phone and we will make sure it is a good fit and that it works and that it fits into your schedule so that you can actually make the changes that you've wanted to make for all this time. All right, so let's dive into these sheets. So I don't know why I started with family because I usually start with individual, but here we are with family. So when you're looking at these sheets, I want you to think through, what are day activities you could do? What are sunny day activities you could do? What are cloudy day activities that the family could do? So, this might not work on a weekday if you're going to work, but it might if you have a sitter. But like, what are those things in all the different weathers of summer that you would do? What are some trips you want to take? What are some food goals you have? Remember, this is a family. So this might be different foods you want to try, a restaurant you want to try. Maybe you want to go tomato picking this year. All of these would go in the food goals area. What are some new rituals you want to integrate? Do you want to have like Friday picnic night? Do you want to take one day off a week and do something spectacular or do something healthy? Go on a hike? What are some new rituals that you really want to take and you want to make happen this summer? What do you want to do just because it's summer? Because there's some things that really actually you only can do in summer. And so what are some of those things? Do you want to try rafting in a river? Do you want to stay up extra late one night, as a family, because usually the kids always go to bed early? Do you want to start, this might fall in rituals, but it could fall in just because it's summer. Like, do you want to go on a walk after dinner every night? They just don't have to be complicated things. The whitewater rafting was a little complicated, but it could be simple things. Okay, I want you to do the same thing for you, but the questions, as you can see, are a little different. What books do you want to read? What self-care rituals? So go back to that morning routine. Do you want to be part of your life? Obviously, they don't all have to happen in the morning, but I can tell you the morning is if you focus on getting some of these in the morning, it's a really good time to create momentum. It's usually quieter in the morning. Your kids are more willing to do something different if they're waking up as early as you are, but sometimes you can get up earlier than them. That's why I love the mornings. What are your food goals for the summer? Do you have a weight loss goal? Do you have an energy goal? Have you always wanted to try to get rid of something in your diet? Or have you ever really wanted to try to master something with food? Like how I said, baking bread or, making a pie. What are your food goals? Do you have work goals? Because one of the biggest frustrations about summer, I feel like I hear from moms, and I work with a lot of mom entrepreneurs or moms who've tried to create flexible work schedules for themselves, or moms who homeschool, which I have to say, if any of you are moms listening who homeschool, that is work. That is a job. I've just gotten through a year of it. It is a job. So what work things do you need to get done, and how can you make that happen in a different level in summer that doesn't happen during the school year? So for example, when I wrote my book 2 summers ago, I was actually able to take 2 different times in the summer, a 4 and 5 day chunk, and my husband or my mom or my mother-in-law had the kids, and I went off somewhere else and did that work. But then around that, on either side of that, for the rest of the summer really, I was fully on. So there's opportunities, again, like that mother's helper that the summer brings, and that can really help you get your work done that you can't do at other times. Sometimes if you're in an office, the summer is a quieter time. So maybe you can finally get to the bottom of your inbox, or you can finally organize all those pictures. So what can summer yield there? But do note that there's only 3 slots there. And I kind of did that on purpose because personally, I always think through a lot of work things and have harder time thinking around the other things. What do you need to get done around the house? Like one of my goals for this summer is to get that basement cleaned out. Like what house projects can you do that the summer really helps with that? What fun can you have? So this is a big one because one of the things that the reason that question in September can be so dread worthy is that we've forgotten to add the fun back into summer. And so by the time September hits, it's just been so busy that we actually almost need a vacation from our summer vacation. And so that's where really pinpointing what's fun, like what can really make this fun for you and enjoyable. And it could be simple, like I want to spend a day playing games with the kids, or I want to go on a camping trip, or I want to start skipping once a day, or bring the hula hoops out. It doesn't have to be a big deal, just little things that make you smile. And then, is there anything that's come up in any of this planning process or in anything that you're just holding in your head that could really wait until late August or the school year to get done? Like, is there something that you're holding on to, a big project or something around the house, or some new habit that just really doesn't need to happen right now because this time isn't meant for that. And a lot of times, these are the things that take us away from our family instead of bring us toward them, um, or just something that could be done equally as well in the winter, so it doesn't need the summer. What can you let go of? Like, what doesn't need to happen and would actually make more space for that fun stuff? And then lastly, there's a sheet that you could print out multiple times for the kids. This is mostly made for kids, but this could be the one you give to your spouse, or you could give the mama one to your spouse. But what books will I read? What projects do I want to work on? So while I'm recording this, my 13-year-old is working on a project, right? So what healthy habits am I going to practice? And this is a place to start having conversations. Like, are your children brushing their teeth every morning? Are they moving their bodies the amount you want to? Maybe they start making their own smoothies, or learning to have a piece of fruit before something else. Like, what healthy habits can they cultivate? What are activities for me? So a lot of times it takes the edge off of your self-care if everybody gets a little bit of the action around that. So what are things like specific to me? And this is also a good way to work with our kids to get out of that just I'm busy mentality. So a lot of times, especially as the school year is ending and we're planning the summer, we're thinking about like I just want to go to that camp because my friend's going to that camp, or I want to do that because X is doing that, or I saw that sign and that looks fun. But activities just for me could be as simple as spending a day on a picnic blanket out back by myself. And mom packs me lunch and I have the day all to myself. Like, it doesn't have to be big things. And in fact, sometimes when we start thinking about the things that we really want to do, even as a child, we start to realize that those busy things actually aren't as satisfying. And as parents, it helps us as we process with our kids not sign up for so many of those things, which tend to get in the way, just saying, of healthy meals. Okay, what activities am I doing with my family? So this might come off of the family list, but it just brings ownership back to the kids. So especially in the tween years or the teen years, this might help if one of the activities you're doing as a family is like going on a road trip or looking at a museum, that they own that and want to do that. And then how can they help around the house, or what needs to happen around the house? And this could be a combination of things that they could think about their own microcosm in their room, but also pitch into stuff that needs to happen in the house. So that's what I've got, my friends. And again, this should be a lot. You have these sheets, you have this video. The next free training is going to be all about the day and the breakdown of the day, and this is something that you can use over and over again for the rest of your life. But then I will have taught this body of work that you can totally take yourself and do. There'll be other opportunities to sign up for the group things in the future. And again, I have this super exciting thing that I can't wait to share with you happening in September. But if you are one of those 6 and it's just like nagging that you've never been able to not feel busy and everything feels overwhelming and you're not sure like how to do this work thing and be a good mom and show up in this way for your kids and show up for this way for your boss, and you want to fit healthy eating into it, but it's not working and you're really ready to get all that under control, then let's spend the summer working on it. And it's going to be a good 3-month chunk that we would work together, and then come September and into September you're just going to thrive because you're going to have had this relaxing, amazing summer, and then we're going to work to carry that into the fall. So if that speaks to you, make sure to send me an email and we will set up that call ASAP, because again, I have 6 slots and they're going to fill, and then we're going to move on and do the next thing. All right, you guys, have a great day.